But for me, the one thing that's radically changed it is one time we fasted as a team from Thursday, and my husband and I, Dwayne, fasted through till after the display. So we went from Thursday morning through to Friday evening, and I would never go out again without doing that. So every time we go out, we fast for the 2 days, because to me, that makes a huge difference.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of About Abortion. I'm joined today by Claire. Claire, thanks so much for coming on board today. It's great to have you. Let's get to know you a bit. We were just talking before we started recording today. You were married in Texas and now you live in Norwich. I'm not sure which is more glamorous, but you lived in Texas for a bit?
Yes, we lived in Texas for 3 years in small town Texas. So I moved from London, working in London, having studied there, loved London life, having the galleries and everything right on your doorstep, and moved to the middle of nowhere in Texas. And my whole world changed so drastically. Never experienced anything quite like it. So we went from being very cosmopolitan and hip to just a lot of hairspray and rhinestones and shoulder pads were the order of the day.
Fantastic. Sounds like a dream world to me, but I think you're happy to be back.
Yes,
on British soil, yeah. Now we first got into contact, I think, about 2 or 3 years ago. Actually, it was on the UK Blessing song, wasn't it?
Yes,
I think
it was.
We were talking about
via Ben John.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ben from Christian Concern connected us. He's been on this as well, and we were talking really about what the Lord was perhaps saying and doing during that time, during the pandemic, and we got connected in that way. But then it obviously moved on to talking about abortion, and I really just want to hear something today of your journey, your personal journey with this issue up to where you are today. So. We've had your daughter Beth on a number of times, and you both are part of our public education team, as are others from our church, and really just want to hear how you kind of got to that point, what that work is like and how you're finding it. But before we get into that, I just want to read a few verses from James chapter 1, which I think sort of set the tone really for what we're talking about in today's episode, but also over these 3 or 4 that we're doing at the moment. So James chapter 1 from verse 22. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like a man who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But the man who looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues to do this, not forgetting what he has heard but doing it, he will be blessed in what he does. If anyone considers himself religious and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself and his religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So, Claire, have you always been pro-life?
Well, interesting, because I feel like most of your guests come up with the same answer. It's always notionally. I would have called myself pro-life, but would I have actively done anything about that? I don't know. So, yes, nominally.
Yeah, sure. Now, when we first met, as I said, you invited me, actually not knowing I was local.
No.
Isn't it? So I think you got in touch through a mutual friend in London to do with an article I'd written about the UK Blessing, but you didn't know I was just down the road. So then I came and we did, it was a leadership conference, wasn't it? And so it was just for young people looking at Christian leadership. And I think actually I was just talking on Nehemiah. But then you asked me to come back and do some teaching on abortion.
Yes.
Tell me, why did you do that? Was that something that, just tell me how you kind of got to that.
Because so having then, obviously we saw your article on the UK Blessing, so then that kicked off a little bit of research. What else do you blog about? And I just thought it was quite interesting. I didn't know where our congregation would stand on that topic, but I feel like it's been a period of time where God has been challenging the church to make our faith a lot more relevant within. You have to speak out in political circles, or not political circles, but on political issues more strongly. There was a time when, as the church, we could bump along and just, we talked about God and taught about God. But now it's become so entwined with the politics of the day. So it was interesting. We were 100% in agreement with where you stood and felt it would be great to have you come talk to the church on that issue.
So the leadership agreed, okay, we want to get some teaching on this. And obviously you were already, I think that the leadership team and perhaps some, at least in the church, if not all, would have said something perhaps slightly similar, nominally pro-life, notionally pro-life. So there was already a kind of sense of, we agree with where you're coming from. But then what did you find as we actually looked at it head on and taught about it? We handed over a Sunday to it. What sort of came out of that? Were there any surprises? Was there anything that was new either to you or to the church, do you think?
Yeah, I think, so one thing I'd like to say is it was incredibly helpful to have someone come from outside to tackle it. It's a tough issue. So to get someone outside means that you can talk about it in a way that opens the whole thing up much more readily. I think what I got, I was actually out with the children that particular Sunday, so I listened to it again afterwards. But what I got from it was a real sense that this is an issue that we could be, that we could really change the nation's opinion on. That I know in your talk you equate it to slavery. That for me was pivotal. Just beginning to see how it wasn't an issue that we had to just let things happen to us, but that we could, in the strength of God, come and make a difference, change things, radically change things in the nation in the same way that a Wilberforce did.
Yeah, so let's run with that. So we could talk much more about how important teaching is on this issue, but I want to focus in particular today on response to teaching. So, where does it go next? As we read in James, not being just hearers of the word, but doers. So can you just help us to get a sense of what then happened for you? So what was it in particular that moved you to action personally, but also I know others in the church?
Okay, well, let's go. We need to go back a bit further. We have felt for a long time as a church. At one point, there was some books around saying that church isn't for men anymore. Men don't like church, and because it had become a very feminized institution, and we still believed that there was a job for the church to do. Spiritual warfare. We need the men in the church. We need action in the church to impact communities, to impact neighbourhoods, and that kind of thing. But what? It's one thing to say, yes, we need men. The church is about spiritual warfare. We need to be engaging with society. But it was the how. How does that play out in our everyday walk? And when you came along with this issue, we knew the issue was key, but suddenly it was like the pieces that God had been speaking to us as a church in other areas were beginning to click together. And so now here's something that we could actually be very practical with, and that we could get our men to engage in, and we could make a difference in society. We could impact a community with an issue that's so close to God's heart, and yet as a nation we're just completely ignorant of. So it was like several pieces came together with that. And then that's what kicked us off into the practical aspect of the work that we do with the education displays. So I love practical. I'm a lot more practical than I would be sort of a theory person. I learn better from actually just doing it. I mean, with anything, if I'm cooking, making anything, I need to see it and I learn it that way. So for me, it fits so well with the education displays because you can learn on your feet, you can get out there, you do the training, but you also pick it up as you go, and the more you do it, the more you learn, and it's a constant like beginning to and fitting more pieces into it. So yes, that's why for me the education display was actually quite an important step, that it's no longer theory and a nominal assent to yes, abortion's wrong, but now we actually can do something about it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that this was something that almost filled that gap.
Yes.
In terms of actually, apart from anything else, wanting to get men engaged in spiritual warfare. And it's interesting because, of course, we do hear from some people, oh, this is a woman's issue, it's nothing to do with you, you're a man. And yet, of course, and we had a conversation with Linda Rose a couple of weeks ago, which hit this point as well as a whole load of other points. This has got everything to do with men. Men are fathers. Men are husbands, or whatever, and we are made, and you know, God has placed us here in part to be defenders and protectors of our family, and yet the very reason abortion is happening is because, well, where are the men? They're not doing that. They're not defending, and I remember coming into this work myself together with some friends of mine at a similar age. Like, I got a sense in prayer as I was discerning the calling. I remember getting a sense of, wow, Lord, is this the battle? Is this the war that is big enough to engage the whole of me, you know, and a war that's so big that I'm going to need, you know, prayer and whatever, but an engaging fight, you know, because I do think in today's world, you know, I sometimes say to my wife, you know, nowadays men don't hunt, they don't go to war. The closer I get to hunting is the clearance section in Morrison's. You know, that's my biggest kind of catch of the day. But in this, we do find a role for people to defend, and to fight for justice, which is. And
we'd felt, as for a long time as a church, that God was preparing us and calling us for something, but we had no idea what. So there was a lot of learning about spiritual warfare, of feeling called, but no idea how that would work out practically until we got these opportunities. And now I can see it fanning out into lots of other areas, but the catalyst has certainly been that first education display.
So tell us, what is an education display? I'm conscious that some of our listeners will know what that means, some perhaps don't. So just paint the picture. What is a public education display?
So we take images onto the street and display them prominently, which, coming from a photography background, you know, a picture can speak 1,000 words, so we put those pictures out there. We currently also have a display banner that has just some very basic scientific facts on it, and we just display them on the street, and then we engage people as they come past. Lots of people will look and read the information and see the pictures, and then we just ask them, what do you think? You know, what do you think of our pictures? What do you think about abortion? And the idea is to kick off conversations, not aggressively, but just a lot of people really don't think. They don't have an opinion. Like within the church, you know, normally, well, I would say it's a woman's choice, but once you begin to question that, they've got no idea why. So, which is very much where I was. nominally I would have said I'm pro-life, but question it, and I would have been at sea as to why I would say that. It felt right, maybe.
Right.
So the idea is to just ask people to think why they believe what they say they believe, and actually what would be the conclusion of those beliefs if you can get that kind of conversation going. So it's an interesting opportunity to stop people and ask why they think abortion's good.
Yeah, sort of challenging that unexamined life, isn't it? The worldview, where I think most of the people I talk to in the streets, their instinctive reaction is just a kind of an echo of whatever, the headlines, Hollywood, the BBC, whatever. It's just what they think they're meant to say, but they've never thought it through. And some even say that, don't they? I've never talked about this before, you know. And
one gentleman I remember having a conversation with, he was like, he starts off, well, you know, it's a woman's choice, and then he stopped himself and he was like, but I've got a 7-day-old grandson, and I can't imagine what would have happened if he hadn't been born. So even, you know, they can talk themselves in and out of their arguments, because it's those images are so impacting that you can't help but not have a reaction one way or the other to what you're seeing on the streets.
Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you're finding these podcasts helpful. If you are, please do share them. Reviews are really helpful. Like them, tell a friend. It's all just to get this message out to more ears. You know, this is the only regular podcast speaking truth about abortion in the entire country. And this is just such a huge issue. So that would really help us to get the message out if you can do that. Now, those who've been tracking recently, you'll know that we've been spending a lot of time analysing the problem of abortion in the UK, and in particular the problem within the church. And over these next 3 or 4 or so episodes, we're going to be really moving from analysis to action, from the problem to the solution. I'm going to be interviewing a number of people about the work they're doing, shining God's light into the darkness of abortion in our land. Now, we're going to be continuing to look at what Scripture has to say, what's the biblical rationale for getting active, you know, for being a voice for the voiceless. We're going to be doing some training on how to do that effectively. But just over these episodes, we're going to be speaking to the people who are already on this journey. And the idea here is just to inspire you, equip you, mobilize you, and to help you to become doers of the word, not just hearers, when it comes to this mandate to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Yeah, and what do you think is most impactful between the images and the words? What's been your experience on the streets? How do these things work together?
The images, in my opinion, are definitely the strongest, because people will have just a visceral reaction to them, and you haven't said a word, but they are reacting so strongly to what they're seeing and saying. So you're accusing me of, and you're like, well, actually, I'm, you know, really sorry, but we haven't said anything. So the images, in my opinion, are just incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and we have had a number of instances like that, haven't we? Where people have said, so, you know, what you're calling me is, actually I haven't said anything. But also on the other side, we had, didn't we, recently we had a display where there was a young girl, maybe 17 or so, who was pregnant. And she looked at the picture and said, well, clearly, that's a life.
Yes. Yeah, that was the last time we were out. And she was just saying, wow, it's clearly a person, and there's no way I could abort. And she was in a 6th form, and just we sort of had a conversation with her, and she was just so impacted with that knowledge that this was a person inside her that she was now responsible for. And it was lovely to see her eyes opened in that way.
Incredible, what a privilege.
Yes.
And you know, we've had the privilege of meeting some babies on the other side of that as well, you know, where mothers have changed their minds, and that's a great privilege. How do you feel when you're marching out there, it's a Friday lunchtime. How do you feel as you kind of go out there and you sort of, face the music?
Well, absolutely terrified is the only answer to that, because it is such a highly charged thing to do. It's not comfortable, it's not fun, but we always say the best coffee of the month is the one that we have afterwards. But what has changed that to a degree? Okay, one, just the fact that we've done it now for over a year, and we've got some experience under our belt makes a difference. But for me, the one thing that's radically changed it is one time we fasted as a team from Thursday, and my husband and I, Dwayne, fasted through till after the display. So we went from Thursday morning through to Friday evening. And I would never go out again without doing that. So every time we go out, we fast for the 2 days. Because to me, that makes a huge difference in how I'm able to engage, the conversations that I have, and the things that take place in the time. So the praying and the fasting beforehand, then with the actual practical display, I'm still slightly terrified when we go out. And I know that several other members of the team will sort of say, oh, I hate this bit, and that kind of thing, because it is really challenging. Part of me loves that challenge, because I feel like when I go and do it, I'm being faithful to God. I know God's put this here and He's given us this challenge. And even if I have no conversations, I feel like I've changed something in the heavenlies, because I have stood in the middle of the city and been faithful to what I believe God's asked me to do. So, and that was the only thing that got me out that first time.
Right.
Was no matter how terrifying it was, I genuinely knew that God was asking me, would I be prepared to take a stand for the unborn, however scared I was. And I know several of the other team felt exactly the same, and that was the call to arms that God had given us. And if He could trust us with this, then He knew He'd be able to trust us with other things as it goes on. How many of us have read the story of Esther or the story of Wilberforce and just thought, oh, how cool would it be to be that person? But yet, when the rubber hits the road, it's about just being terrified but not running, isn't it? And I felt like, this was where it was at, actually, being a Christian and walking with God. It's one thing to talk it, but it's another thing to be the one standing there, when they're hurling abuse at you and not running 100 miles an hour in the opposite direction. So it's still very challenging, but I feel like the prayer and fasting goes a long way to giving me the courage, and our team the courage, to just step out there.
Yeah, and I think we have seen a real change, haven't we, in the atmosphere.
Oh, huge.
Around those displays, the fasting and praying, but also we've got a team that goes out to pray before, during the display in the area.
Yeah.
And we've seen the difference that's made.
Yes.
It seems as though it's kept some of the bad stuff at bay, but also we've seen some change. We had a lady who came out, I think 3 displays in a row now, against us, as it were.
Oh, yes.
Very vociferous and, railing against us. And then in the last display, we had a conversation. Actually, the first time we had a real sort of heart-to-heart, and she actually, we were able to find some common ground, and she was really softening, letting her guard down, telling some of her story. And I'm sure prayer is what is...
And you go from feeling dread of that person, you're kind of like, oh, here we go, to suddenly you understand some of their backstory, and it just makes the whole engagement totally different, doesn't it? Yeah. I think it's interesting. That key lady particularly, I found very interesting to watch and just see the progression her chain of thought, really.
Yeah. And there's big stuff going on there, isn't there? You know, there's a battle. We know there's a spiritual war going on. There's a battle over souls, and you know, there's the rebellion of the flesh. But you know, it seems that perhaps the truth is piercing that particular heart and mind, and that's going to be contested. You know, and it's our privilege just to bring the message.
Yeah. I feel like education. I'm not good at education displays, because I'm not a natural evangelist, so I find it really hard to engage people in conversations. But I also feel, as one of the leaders of the church, if I'm not out there, how can I expect anyone else to be out there? So I think it's important on that level as well. I don't want to preach it from the front and say, you know, this is where we need to be engaged, and then sort of kick back and say, but I'll just pray from the prayer room, guys, and good luck.
And it does make a difference. I think people do respond to that.
Yeah.
That example, you know, and conversely, where that isn't there, it's difficult, because I know a lot of people who are, you know, as it were, the only pro-lifer in their church, you know, and they don't feel that with support, and they feel quite misunderstood or whatever, and quite lonely, really. But it's been a joy to see here a real core coming out of the church. Yes,
and it's been really exciting as well, just to see who else steps up and wants to get engaged in it, and also then within the church you've got a natural opportunity for evangelism. So for those evangelists that you've got sitting in the pews, this is a natural place for them to be able to express themselves, to come out and to engage. Although I do feel like most of the members of our team are not natural evangelists, are we?
Interesting, yeah. I remember someone saying, in fact, it might even been you. Someone in the team said, normally I find evangelism difficult, but actually on a public education display, the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, it is, definitely. I'm not a natural evangelist, and I'm not good, but I feel like it's long enough I've given myself the excuse of, oh, I'm not naturally good at this. But when you get out there and have to do it, it's just exciting, because to watch people respond, or to be able to give them a gospel and say, you know, why don't you take this away and have a look at it? You don't know what God can do with that, and that you've just been faithful in somehow, you know, talking to that person, and who knows what the Holy Spirit can do with the words that you've spoken. And certainly when people can talk me round in knots on the pro-abortion argument, and I'm learning the arguments, because they tend to be just a very small handful of arguments, so I'm learning what the responses are as we go. But I genuinely believe that, you know, the Holy Spirit can take anything, no matter how poorly we feel we've argued our cause. He can take anything and make them think it through at any point after your conversation.
And we believe God, don't we, for those divine appointments.
Absolutely.
He brings people in a really timely way. We often get to pray for people on a display.
Yes.
And sometimes, as you say, we don't always know where that's going to go.
No.
We talk about putting a pebble in someone's shoe, and so off they go, and there's something niggling them. You know, and seed sowing is a ministry, isn't it? Someone else will do the watering. But it's a terrific opportunity. We measure that, I think, about 2,000 people tend to walk past us on a display, see the pictures, they're challenged, and many of them will have a conversation, which is not bad for a couple of hours' work.
No, no. And I've had some great conversations with people, and I think two of them over the whole year. But two of them, definitely people walked away saying they'd never really thought about it, or it had changed their mind. And it's not, sometimes it's nothing that you say, but a life event that's happened to them, like the guy who'd got the grandson, and that kind of thing. And then seeing the pictures, and then having somebody say, what do you think, has just made him totally reevaluate the value of life and his opinion towards it. So I reckon a couple of those great conversations that you're just privileged to have with people you may never see again. Some heartbreaking ones where people just tell you that they've never told anyone else before, but they had an abortion when they were younger and now they understand what they did. And opportunities, like you say, to pray with them, whether on the spot or just say, I will be praying for you if they'd rather not be there. So yes, it's such a valuable part of what the church offers to a community or to a city that is underestimated, I think, on so many levels. It's not just about fighting for the unborn, but it's fighting for the women that are struggling with these, and the fathers that are struggling with the repercussions of decisions they maybe made 30 years ago and are still living with.
And it's a great opportunity, isn't it? Speak about all the big stuff. It's we often have especially with young people, it seems we have to have these conversations about what makes us valuable, because these kids come out saying, well, my life's of no value, and what a gospel opportunity to say, actually, regardless of what you think, regardless of what you feel, you are valuable because God made you, and we're able to minister.
And just being shocked at how many people say that it's a bizarre thing to say, isn't it? But that they would have preferred it if their mum had aborted them. So that shows you the level of struggle they're dealing with, trying to find their place in a society that doesn't value them at any point. So yes, a few heartbreaking conversations with young women who feel they'd have been better off dead.
But this is what I think about door knocking, any kind of open air work. When you're out there meeting the people, I think it does two things. It broadens your mind and it breaks your heart.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy, isn't it? Just in the church, we do our thing, and to be honest, we can be quite unaware of where people are at out there. But then when you have these conversations, you think, goodness, this is real.
Yes.
People don't know what they're here for. People don't know the first thing about Jesus. People have a firm view on abortion, but they never thought about it. You just think, goodness, there's all this ignorance, there's all this misunderstanding, and people just need to have the truth.
Yeah.
And what a privilege to bring it to them. But I find it very sobering, and it's just very healthy to have that mind-broadening, heartbreaking experience on a regular basis, just to make sure I'm not out of touch with my own society, where I live. So really valuable. So tell me, Claire, what gives you hope? What keeps you going out there?
I have a genuine faith that we have all the tools we need to see this completely changed, and to see abortion stopped for future generations. I genuinely believe that we can change hearts and minds in society, and through the Holy Spirit, that the work we're doing will one day be seen as so valuable for society. I have no grand illusions. I don't think anyone will remember sort of the team I'm on or who we are by name, but I think we're part of something that's so much bigger than we understand, and that's an incredible feeling, to be able to say that I'm part of something that's really important, and I believe we can make a difference.
Amen. I'd like to finish just by reading out a quote from William Wilberforce. This was in 1791, part of a speech he gave to the House of Commons. Let us not despair. It is a blessed cause, and success ere long will crown our exertions. Already we have gained one victory. We have obtained for these poor creatures the recognition of their human nature, which for a while was most shamefully denied. This is the first fruit of our efforts. Let us persevere, and our triumph will be complete. Never, never will we desist till we have wiped away this scandal from the Christian name, released ourselves from the load of guilt under which we at present labour, and extinguished every trace of this bloody traffic, of which our posterity, looking back to the history of these enlightened times, will scarce believe that it has been suffered to exist, so long a disgrace and dishonour to this country. William Wilberforce, House of Commons, 18th of April, 1791. Well, thank you so much, Claire, and thank you everyone for listening in today. And if you've been stirred to action, please go right ahead to CBRUK.org/join. That's JOIN, CBRUK.org/join, and you can get trained up and released into a public education team, just like Claire has been sharing with us today. Thanks for listening in. God bless you, and see you again next week.